Hey there, kids! It's me, MrCreepyPasta. And before we get started on tonight's story, I'm going to, first off, tell you about my Twitch. For those of you who don't follow me on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/MrCreepyPasta, as if that wasn't going to be my obvious Twitch. But my Twitch is where I record stories like the one you're going to be hearing tonight live. If there's any interest in that, or just hanging out with me, or talking to me as a person, and not always just as a faceless, nameless, masked narrator on the internet, then hey, be sure to follow me. I'd love to see you there. And I'm also going to tell you about tonight's sponsor. Hey you, I see you sitting there watching me. Well, now I want you to listen to me. I assume you're listening to me more than watching me. Let me tell you about the best mobile game. In fact, it should probably be the only mobile game around, because you'll never need another mobile game again. If you don't know what it is by now, let me tell you about it. It's Raid Shadow Legends. If you've heard of Raid Shadow Legends, then you know it's got a ton of champions, over 600 now. But it's also got a ton of badass bosses that fight in totally unique ways. Take a look at one now. Sir Galaroth, Guardian of the Arcane Keep. Unlike most of the other Potion Keep bosses, this dude is actually a pretty nice guy. I mean, sort of like a paladin, tasked with protecting arcane knowledge so only the worthy can use it. I mean, literally though, he is guarding arcane potions, and he is checking to see if you're worthy of getting your hands on them. And to do that, you gotta beat him up. He can be tricky if you're not ready, but he's one of the most straightforward boss battles in Raid. His main mechanic is in his basic attack. Deals a ton of extra damage to any champion without buffs, so your mission is to keep an AoE buff on your team at any cost. I mean, it seems easy, but it's complicated by the boss's left minion, which will strip all your team's buffs every time it gets a turn, so don't let it. Take that sucker out first. As for the rest of it, as long as you can keep buffs on your team, the boss shouldn't be too tough. Just bring a balanced team and buff your way to victory. What I like about the game is, of course, the champions. I mean, let's be honest. Look at my champions, okay? I got a few. I got more than a few. Also, there's a whole bunch of dark elves and dark arcane magics to be able to go with. And what's new about Raid? There's a ton of stuff happening in Raid this month. Special events every day, a bunch of awesome new champions, and the brand new, huge feature Guardian ring that gives you a load of new ways to use your champions. And at the start of December, Raid's releasing one of its biggest, most anticipated features ever. Take a look at this. It looks insane. With all the new updates and an even bigger one right around the corner, now's the perfect time to get started in Raid. And if you wait any longer, you're only going to get left behind. So if you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan my QR code, and you'll get an extra hero, Shinoru, who is amazing at the Doom Tower. 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard, so you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in the game. All that treasure will be waiting for you here. And once you're in, you can find me in the game under the name MrCreepyPasta. Somebody took my name. And if you're fast, you can join my clan. And it's that easy. Just click the link in the description, and I'll see you in game. Jacob Masterson sat by his campfire, his great coat wrapped tightly around him, looking up with disdain at the falling snow. He took a small sip of his hot coffee and lit up a smoke. He was tired and bone-weary. The ride from Arizona territories to West Virginia had been long and arduous, the seasons changing all about him until, at long last, he had arrived in the foothills of the Appalachians. He had no idea why he was here. He only knew that he had been drawn south. Jacob never questioned these feelings. Sometimes God screamed in his ear. Sometimes it was no more than a subtle whisper on the wind. Didn't matter to Jacob. He simply followed and killed whatever needed killing. He supposed one day he would die in the service of his God. But Jacob wasn't afraid. He had bought his ticket to heaven long ago and stamped it with blood. Yet it seemed there was a long way to go before God called him home to glory. "Well," Jacob sighed, crushing out his smoke and standing, "better get to it then. Ain't gonna get much done freezing my ass off in the snow." His nearby horse snorted her agreement. Okay, Jacob said, saddling her up. "Full of beans this morning, ain't you, girl?" He smiled, stroking her silken neck fondly before kicking loose snow over the embers of his dying campfire and heading into the mountains. The ride was a treacherous one, the deep snow hiding the rough terrain beneath. As the day went on, Jacob became colder and colder. He sat huddled in his saddle, constantly blowing his warm breath into his cupped hands, desperate to warm his frozen fingers. "You better get me to where we're going," he said, looking towards the heavens. Man can't shoot iron if he's got no damn fingers left. Soon they found themselves on a winding trail, leading further up into the forest-covered mountain. Just then a whiff of smoke was carried on the breeze, and Jacob's horse veered off to the left. Jacob didn't fight it, but let his horse lead the way. As he sat hunched over, his saddle coat pulled tight about him. After about another half hour, they rounded a bend and came upon a flat, rocky spur. Jacob smiled at the sight of a small wooden trading post, stable and all. "Praise Jesus," Jacob said, dismounting the mare and leading her by the reins towards the waiting stables. Just then, a woman stepped out, smothered in heavy furs, her dark hair blowing in growing wind. Noticing Jacob, she gave a friendly wave and hurried across, her booted feet leaving tracks in the dirty snow. "Afternoon, mister," she smiled, her beauty flawed by her many missing teeth. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am," Jacob said, tipping his hat politely, "I'd be grateful if you could rub down my horse, give her a feed and a place to rest for the night. Hell, I could use some of the same myself." "Sure, mister," she said, rubbing her chin. "We can do all that and more, but I gotta see the color of your money first. We prefer silver, but we'll take Yankee dollars too." Jacob reached into his coat pocket and shoved a wad of grimy bills and a few silver dollars into her outstretched hand. The woman quickly counted out the money and gave Jacob the rest back. "That'll cover your horse. Go see Samuel inside for the rest of your doings." "Much obliged, ma'am," Jacob said, stuffing the remaining money back into his pocket and heading for the trading post door. "You take care of that horse," he called after her. "She's one of God's chosen." "Ain't we all?" the woman cackled, leading the big mare away. "Yeah, I ain't too sure of that," Jacob mumbled, as he stepped inside, banging the snow from his wet boots. "Close the damn door," the fat man called across the room from where he sat huddled around the crackling fireplace. "Was you born in a barn?" Jacob did as he was bid, ignoring the other man as he strolled across the room, ducking to avoid the low-hanging beams from which hung dried meats and musky-smelling herbs. The man behind the counter was bald, weaselly thin and sickly-looking. Jacob nodded his approval as he noted the well-stocked shelves behind the smiling proprietor. "How can I help you, friend?" the man said, wiping his hands on a dirty-looking apron. "You Samuel?" Jacob said, drawing closer. "No," the fat man smirked from across the room, taking a long, hard pull on his whiskey bottle. "He's the president of these here United States." "Ignore him," the proprietor whispered, as if scared of being overheard. "He's drunk is all." "I need a hot meal and a room for the night," Jacob continued. "Think you can manage that?" "I couldn't manage a brothel." "I'm getting tired of your mouth, friend," Jacob said, rounding on the other man. "Ain't your friend," the man replied, sitting up straighter. "Then why are you running your mouth in my direction?" Jacob said, crossing the room and looming over the other man. "I'll say whatever I damn please," the big man said, jumping to his feet, his face flushed with liquor and rage. "Mister," Jacob said, looking up at the big man, "I've been in a real bad mood for about the past 10 years now, so open your mouth just once, just one more goddamn time, see what happens." The big man went to do just that, but before the words could pass his lips, Jacob rammed a gnarled fist into his face. There was an explosion of blood and teeth, and the big man sat down hard, completely unconscious. "Now what did I tell you?" Jacob said, flexing his knuckles gingerly. "Some folks are always pissing in the wind. You there," he called to the skinny man behind the counter, who was wringing his hands together nervously. "Grab a hold of his happy asshole's legs." "What are you going to do with him, mister?" he said, hurrying over. "Reckon I already did it," Jacob replied, hooking his hands onto the big guy's arms. "Now catch a hold. This fool is stinking up the place." "You can't mean to put him outside," the skinny man protested as he grabbed up the man's legs. "He'll freeze to death out there." "Oh, like I give a tinder's fuck," Jacob said, lifting the snoring man. "Please, mister. John Patrick came from real bad folks. I don't want no blood feud with them." Okay then. We dump him in the barn. Goddamn nervous Nelly," Jacob said, heading for the door. "Let's get it done." Both men were back inside in just a few minutes, the door firmly closed against the approaching storm. "Now," Jacob continued, leaning against the heavy barn. "About that room?" "Oh, sure," Samuel grinned. pouring them both a shot of whiskey. I got 3 of them out back. Good job you came along when you did. They were all full until just a couple of days ago.
Oh, now who in their right mind would be up here in this god-awful weather? Other than a fool like me,
Jacob asked, throwing back his whiskey, glad for its glowing warmth. Germans. We got Germans staying here.
Germans,
Jacob repeated, cocking one bushy eyebrow.
What in the hell would Germans want around these parts?
Treasure hunting, Sam said, tapping the side of his nose before pouring them both another shot. Looking for Swift's mine, I reckon.
Never heard of it.
You ain't? Sam asked, looking genuinely surprised. It's a local legend around here. In fact, I'd say people have heard of Swift's mine all over the South and beyond.
Never heard of it,
Jacob said stubbornly. Sure you have, the other man went on, now caught up in his own story. John Swift was an English fella. Sometime around the early 1700s, he was up in the mountains when he came across a dying bear. Tracked it all the way to an old cave.
Thought you said it was a mine.
Well, it was. Well, anyway, the man ignored him, his eyes far away. They say that John found a streak of silver ore there, a mile long, maybe some kind of treasure. There are reports of old John bringing whole bars of silver and minted coins down off the mountain.
Sounds like hogwash to me, Jacob replied, crushing out his smoke.
Well, them German fellas didn't seem to think so. They stopped here to rest up for the night before carrying on their way. Had a whole mule team with them, laden down with all manner of equipment. Sam was suddenly interrupted by a scream of pain from outside and the sound of galloping hooves.
What in tarnation's going on now?
Jacob said, crossing the room and throwing open the door. He was just in time to see a rider vanishing into the snow-covered forest. Mary! Pushing roughly past Jacob and over to the bleeding stable girl who sat in a heap upon the ground, a wad of snow pressed against the side of her swollen face. I'm sorry, mister, she said as Jacob approached. I tried to stop him. John Patrick stole your horse, his saddle and all.
He did what?
Jacob exploded. The girl winced and cowered back down at the look in Jacob's eyes. I'm real sorry. I managed to wrestle your saddlebag from him, if that counts for anything. Jacob was no longer listening. He stalked away, thinking hard.
No way, he mumbled to himself. No way that old girl of mine would just let him take her. I mean, as sure as Christ died on the cross, she would have thrown him.
I'm real sorry about this, mister, Samuel said as he helped the girl back to her feet.
Never mind all that now, Jacob said, turning to face him. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Looks like I'm gonna need another horse. Oh yeah, I'll take that double bear you got hanging over the fireplace, too.
You best be careful if you're going up against John Patrick. He's a real bad man.
Oh yeah? Jacob smiled. I'm a real bad man, too.
Samuel wilted under that smile and hurried away, wishing to God that he'd never laid eyes on Jacob Masterson. Less than 20 minutes later, Jacob was heading through the forest. Samuel didn't have a horse, only an old, stubborn mule which Jacob now sat astride, cursing, as his booted feet dragged through the snow. He knew exactly where he was going. Samuel had given him very clear instructions.
I swear to God,
Jacob growled, trying hard to control the stubborn mule.
I'm gonna shoot that hillbilly fool right in the asshole. Boy's gonna be shitting buckshot for the rest of his days.
Be careful, Samuel had called after him as he had ridden away. There's a whole village of those crazies up there. They ain't fond of strangers. Now from atop a rocky outcrop, Jacob looked down on that very same village. If that's what you wanted to call it. The place was nothing more than a collection of rough-looking huts, from which dirty smoke billowed up into the graying sky, and the street nothing more than muddy sludge.
Nice place,
Jacob said, tying the mule to a nearby tree and grabbing up his shotgun before heading down the hill and standing at the entrance of the village. There he threw back his coat, revealing his gleaming revolvers, before firing both barrels of the shotgun into the air and quickly reloading.
You people better get your asses out here. Reckon we have some business needs to be attended to.
The first into the street was John Patrick, a large, shit-eating grin on his face as the rest of his clan swarmed out behind him. You shouldn't have come here, mister, he grinned through rotting teeth. You's a dead man now. Jacob ignored it.
This fool got any kinfolk here?
He yelled into the crowd.
I's John Ken. A man in filth-covered overalls pushed his way to the front of the crowd. We is cousins, he said, raising a wicked-looking machete. You shouldn't have come here, mister. Now let me get this straight, Jacob said, addressing the other man. If I was to kill old John Patrick here, that would mean a blood feud between you and me. That's right, the man grinned. Figured as much. John sighed, dropping his shotgun into the dirt. He drew his pistols in one fluid motion and shot both men to the face. The crowd let out a startled cry, quickly tossing an assortment of rusty weapons into the mud. Now, John said, casting a baleful eye over the white-faced crowd. Anybody else claiming to be kinfolk of those two happy assholes? The remaining member of the crowd shook their heads so fast, anyone would think their asses were on fire and their hair was catching. That's just fine then, Jacob said, reaching down and scooping up his shotgun. Now somebody better go get me my horse. And I swear by Judas's stretched neck, if there's so much as a tick on that girl's hide, I'm gonna start burning stuff. A man quickly ran down the side of one of the houses as the rest of the murmuring crowd dispersed. He was back less than a minute later, leading Jacob's horse by the reins. She's just fine, mister, he said with an egg-sucking grin. Jacob ignored the man, looking him up and down. Where'd you get that fancy coat? He said, fingers running through the fine fur trim. And those climbing boots you're wearing? I didn't steal them, the man swallowed hard. That fellow's already dead, or close to it anyway. What fella? Jacob said, suddenly realizing this was part of why he had been brought here. He came down from the mountain, other man said, cringing from the fire that burned in Jacob's eyes. He's a foreigner, talks some strange language, his face was all torn up, his throat bit. He didn't last too long. Yeah, I bet he didn't, Jacob growled. Which direction did he come? North, the other man replied quickly. Probably looking for silver up in them old caves. But there he suddenly stopped, his eyes growing wide, knowing he had said too much. Cave. Jacob seized upon it. You mean mine? Swift's mine. Ain't no mine, the other man sighed defeatedly. It's a cave, a whole system of caves, further up the mountain, but you don't want to go to that place, mister. Place is cursed. People go missing all the time. Usually fools looking for treasure, even a few trappers, mountain men. It's real bad. You don't go anywhere near it, sir. No, sir. But you know where it is? Jacob asked. I mean, sure. But you can't stay away from a place if you don't know where it is. Good point. Get yourself on that mule. Looks like you're playing guide today. No, not me. Not me, sir. I ain't going anywhere near that hellhole. What's your name, boy? Jacob said, turning the shotgun towards him. Isaac, the man said, suddenly freezing in place. Okay, Isaac. I'm gonna give you to the count of 3 to get your fool self on that mule, or you're gonna be sporting 2 assholes for the rest of your days. 1. The man was on the mule before Jacob could even hit 2. All right then, he said, climbing aboard the big mare and patting her neck fondly. Lead the way. It was late afternoon when they crested another small hillock, and the entrance of the cave finally came into sight. Both men were shaking in their saddles, their breath pluming in the frozen air. It was here that the man called Isaac pulled up his mule, causing the startled creature to paw angrily at the ground. This is as far as I go, mister, he said, his voice trembling. You can shoot me if you like, but I ain't going no further than this. Even the Cherokee don't go near that place. And they's braver men than I. All right, Jacob sighed. You don't have to get any closer, but on one condition. You have to take that mule back to Samuel at the trading post. Sure, do whatever you want, he said, quickly turning around and heading for the bush. Jacob watched him go until he was out of sight, then turned back towards the waiting cave. So, he said, looking towards the heavens, mind giving me a clue? But there was only the whispering of the wind and the cold snow upon his face. Useful, he said, clambering down from his horse. It's real useful. I'm gonna be pissed if you sent me all this way for a rabid bear. He grumbled, stalking towards the cave's entrance. He'd only taken a few steps when he came to a sudden stop. There was blood here,
a lot of it, soaked into the snow. As Jacob looked on in horror, he started to see bones gnawed clean amongst the scraps of cloth, twine, and other leather. "This ain't no bear," he said, keeping a wide eye on the cave's entrance, as with trembling fingers, he reached down and grabbed up a nearby bone. The bone had been completely stripped clean of flesh and cracked open to extract the precious marrow within. Triangle-like gouges ran down its length, leaving deep indents. "Oh, shit," Jacob said, throwing the bone back down. "Looks like somebody's got a serious set of gnashers on them. Suppose I better go introduce myself then," he said, heading back towards the cave's entrance. He could smell something now, carried on the wind. Not just the smell of carrion meat, but something else. Something wild and brutish that made the skin on the back of your neck tighten and your bowel feel hot and heavy. Jacob took a few deep breaths and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the rusting tools that lay scattered all about, and a few small drums simply labeled fuel. Jacob didn't like the look of those drums. They were old and rusting, and it seemed to him that the sides were ever so slightly bulging. There was also a smell in the air like rotting fish and gone-over eggs. "Jesus," Jacob cursed. "Smells worse than 50-cent brothel." Unslinging his shotgun, he ventured further inside, glad for the cave's wide entrance that flooded the interior with light. Still, it grew darker as he headed deeper within, the cave floor beginning to slope ever so slightly. The smell was stronger now, strong enough to make Jacob's eyes water, and suddenly the ground beneath him was gone. With a cry, he fell some few feet into the stone-cold floor. "Fuck me," he said, rubbing at his side gingerly. But then he stopped, staring in horror up at the cave's jagged ceiling from which hung 3 tattered and torn bodies, wrapped in twisted vines like some grotesque flowers. Their bloody fingers trailed across the cave floor. Jacob pulled out one of his revolvers, licking his lips nervously. His eyes searching the shadowy gloom, but there was nothing. Only a waiting silence like the whole world was holding its breath. Slowly, Jacob rose to his feet and waited. But still nothing moved. He stood that way for some time, his back pressed hard against the stone ledge, his ears attuned for the slightest movement. Eventually, he lowered his gun, but did not holster it as he walked over to the swinging corpses. Taking in the missing flesh and terrible damage, he was just reaching for one of the corpses, meaning to cut it down, when a spade-claw hand exploded from the chest. Talon-like fingers slashed for Jacob's startled face. With a cry, he reared back, his knife slashing at the twisted vine, cutting the hanging body free, dragging the creature down under its own weight, revealing its true and terrible form. The creature was long and impossibly thin, with a gray, scaly hide, but the most terrifying thing of it was its head, which was skull-like with a massive jaw from which 2 deer-like antlers slashed at the air as it fought itself free. Jacob had spent enough time in the Indian nations and heard enough tales to recognize a Wendigo when he saw it. "God, cursed son of a bitch!" he growled, slapping leather as he fired both revolvers into the approaching creature, the air thick with the smell of gun smoke. The Wendigo screamed as round after round of hot lead smashed into its loathsome body, until at last it fell to its knees before Jacob, reaching for him with slashing claws, but Jacob leapt back, sending his knife down into a whistling arc, burying it deep into the top of the creature's skull. The thing's whole body went rigid, its twisted muscles standing out in stark relief before it fell down at Jacob's feet. "There's a curse on the ground because of you," he intoned. "Only through painful toil you eat from it. From the ground you were taken from the dust. You, and on to the dust you shall be returned." That said, he made the sign of the cross over the creature and yanked his knife free. As soon as he did, the creature sprang back to life, grabbing at his jean-clad legs and sending him sprawling onto the ground. Jacob howled in pain as the creature's jaw clamped down on his booted foot like a bear trap, cracking bone and bruising flesh. "Motherfucker!" Jacob screamed, slashing at the creature's face, extinguishing the crimson light from one glaring eye.
Now it was the creature's turn to howl in pain as it rolled away, one spade claw hand scrambling at its ruined face. Jacob shot to his feet, ignoring the pain in his shattered foot. As he scrambled up the ledge, he almost made it, but the creature shot out of the darkness. Latching onto his leg, it bit down hard, tearing a chunk of Jacob's calf away. For a moment, the whole world was an agony-filled hell, but Jacob dug deep, feeding on his fear and hate as he pistoned his free leg over and over again into the creature's snarling face. At last, it fell back into the darkness, setting Jacob free as he stumbled and limped away, the sound of his furious heartbeat like a war drum in his ears, his hot breath pluming in the frozen air. He could hear it coming, howling and gibbering as it closed in. Jacob picked up his pace, leaving a goodish amount of blood behind him. The entrance was before him now, the storm outside blowing like a white death. With one Herculean effort, he threw himself forward, twisting onto his back, pistols aimed at the creature as it came lunging at him, screeching its triumph. Jacob grinned and pulled the trigger, exploding one of the bulging barrels. There was a terrible explosion, as if the whole world was on fire, and the Wendigo was hurled through the air, its twisting body on fire as it landed hard in the snow. Jacob clambered to his feet and stumbled over to the writhing monstrosity. The creature had suffered terrible damage, both legs torn free, leaving ragged stumps behind which oozed blackened blood. Its ribcage had been torn open, revealing its still-beating heart.
"Tough son of a bitch, ain't you?"
Jacob said, plunging his hands into the Wendigo's chest and tearing the still-beating heart free, and yet still the creature would not die. Smiling, Jacob brought the blackened heart to his mouth and he bit down hard. The creature let out a scream that only the truly damned could muster. Still smiling, Jacob tossed its freezing heart into the purifying fire. Instantly, the Wendigo fell into ruined ash and was soon blown away in the wind.
"Ashes to ashes, and dust to dust,"
Jacob said, limping away. But the world tilted as he was hit with a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled, falling down, his back against a nearby tree, blood staining the snow.
"It was one hell of a party."
Jacob smiled weakly, blood staining his lips. With a sigh, he closed his eyes and waited. There was no tunnel of light. There was no chorus of angels. Only an infinite darkness that Jacob gladly fell into. From the depths of the frozen forest, dark eyes watched on as the wind walked and talked all about him, howling like a harbinger of doom. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. For those of you that want to hear more than just me, there's also a new app out called Chilling. The Chilling app is currently available on Android and on iOS, and it has new and exclusive stories just for the app done by myself and many, many other narrators. More importantly, I think that the coolest thing about it is the ambience feature that allows you to set your own tone and background sounds and music. As the app calls itself, it's a more intense way to relax. And as always, I want to give a big thank you to all of my contributors on Patreon. You guys are the real MVP, you guys keep the lights on here, and allow me to do a whole bunch of cool things like exclusive stories, and a very special thank you to all of the big skeleton patrons, such as Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Brian Arce, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Mask Note, Rashad Collins, Joshua Mullen, Zavium, Dan Pham, Matthew McNeese, Shelly J, Ben Spates, Anna Storm, Jeremy H, raltizal, Nana, The Morgan, Diamondella, MeltedLake, Tully Sue, William King, Reaper 61167, Darth Miver, Micah Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Isoda Hatred, Nessie, Parafa Panda, Bardo Hawk 764, Melancholy Corpse, Ferb, Lambda M98, Harley, Billy Morrow, Sashi Suzaku, at Grizzly Olsen Pro, Caden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Miss Exandra, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Fried Chicken 12, Freddy Krueger, Michael Scarborough, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Fester Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of Patreon, and for everybody who's down there in the description, and everybody who even contributes just $1 to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And, as always, my friends, sweet dreams.